Welcome back to another exciting show here. It's the morning show on the Rise News. I'm Rufai Hosseini.
I'm Adesoa Omoron.
And I'm Shaito Atigari. Thank God it's Friday.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Well, to the business of the day, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari met with Vladimir Putin, his Russian counterpart, in the ongoing Russia-Africa summit. Now, both presidents agreed to put Nigeria-Russia relations on a fast track and pursue the completion of all abandoned projects initiated by both countries.
Very correctly, Adesoa. Nigeria's president stated that fresh energy will be injected into Nigeria and Russian relations to bolster age-long relationship that has been mutually rewarding and promising, while calling for a stronger partnership that is humane, inclusive, and diversified.
The summit, which focuses on exploring and expanding opportunities in security, trade and investment, science, technology, and gas production, has in attendance as delegates Governors Mohammed Yahaya of Gombe State, Bello Matawale of Zamfara State, and Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti State. Also in attendance is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, Adeni Adebayo of Trade and Investment, and Mr. Olamilekan Adegbite of Mines and Steel Development. We also have Mr. Timi Pre-Silva, the Minister of State for Petroleum.
Indeed. Now, the Russia-Africa Summit is co-chaired by President Vladimir Putin of Russia, and African Union Chairman and President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Well, joining us to review the economic importance of this summit is Achike Chude, a public affairs analyst. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Let's go right into it. Looking at some of the deals, which are mostly MOUs that have been signed, oil refinery, a joint venture between NNPC and Russia-based Lukoil. Talking about gas infrastructure, NNPC and Gazprom. On Ajaokuta, Russia has agreed to come back to finish the project on government-to-government basis. Talking about rail line from Lagos to Calabar. What is your impression of this summit so far? What is the biggest takeaway? And are you optimistic about these deals that have been signed?
Well, obviously, Russia has been out of the continent for decades now, I would say. Of course, Russia, under the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, and though the engagement then with the African continent was more or less powered by, strong ideological compass, creating clientele regimes in order to counter the, American imperialism and, of course, the threat posed to them by NATO. And, of course, we had that situation where proxy wars were being created in the continent. And then these conflicts were being, fought on behalf of both traditional powers then. But obviously, a lot of things have changed. The world is no longer a bipolar world. In fact, to a large extent, you could say it is a multipolar world. And so you see, for instance, African leaders being invited for the 7th TICAD conference summit in Japan. We saw also African leaders in China. We saw the meeting some years back, between African, leaders, political leaders, and United States, Obama then, and then now we have, Russia coming into the fray. Obviously, Vladimir Putin has been rebuilding Russian society for quite some time. And again, what it means is that a vacuum has been left in the African continent. America and Europe are no longer as influential as they used to be in the African continent. So new partners are being sought. But I think that what worries me about all of this is the fact that I think I'm not exactly comfortable with with African leaders lining up one after the other, going cap in hand. You have the impression of a group of people who believe that they cannot resolve their socio-political contradictions by themselves, and they need the input of foreign leaders. Now, we are in a global world, so there's really nothing wrong with this kind of high-level interaction. But then the issue is, what are they going there to give to the Russians? You realize that it's all about collecting. And again, when these countries are engaging with you, what is their primary target? It is the natural resources of the continent, which they have continued to exploit for years, even before, prior to independence and after independence, so we found ourselves in a situation where we have shown lack of capability in terms of the right kind of industrial climate. Of course, we have, problems with energy and so on, where we now need to add value to most of the natural resources that we have been endowed with. And so you find that this has been the mainstay of our interaction with global powers over the years. Yes, at the level of maybe the agreements MOU signed in the with the petroleum ministry, NMC, I would say yes to a large extent. Russia has a lot of expertise in that field. Russia is a very resource-rich country in terms of foreign, natural gas and then oil and all that. So they have expertise in that, and I'm sure that they could be, useful to the country.
Okay, Achike, I just wanted to come in there when we kept on talking about Russia and Nigeria relations. What is going to be different this time? And I'll give you an instance. Yeah. You say joint partnership. NNPC and Gazprom has an existing joint partnership called NIGAS.
Yes.
It's on ground. Yeah. It's not being wheeled. Yeah. Another very strong point is the aluminium smelting plant in Ikotabasi, Alcorn. Ikotabasi is still there. Ikotabasi was supposed to be the beacon of the industrialized Nigeria when it was set up under Ibrahim Babangida. Till date, nothing is working. Ajaokuta is there. Natasha Akpoti did go back to the House of Reps, and she gave a very detailed case study on what was happening at Ajaokuta. Our government heard that, and nothing was done. I mean, so what is going to be different this time around? So when they say we're signing partnerships, I ask, but we have a pre-existing one, except if the one with Lukoil is a new one. But there is NIGAS on ground, within NMC and Gazprom.
They're existing.
But what is happening? What is going to be different?
Maybe another way of even rephrasing the question you ask again is, what is going to be different about our political leadership? What is going to be different about their temperament, about their commitment to the Nigerian state and all of that? Because ultimately, it's about the commitment of the political elites, to the affairs of the country that determines a lot of other things, especially when it comes to international, business agreements like this. So I would agree with you. Some of these agreements have been there. And then do we expect anything different? There has not been any radical fundamental change within the Nigerian polity in terms of leadership, in terms of governance, in terms of the structure of the Nigerian state. And so you cannot give what you do not have. Yes, it is important that some of these things, you go into them. But do you have the political will to actually execute? And it's a tragedy when you look at some of the enterprises you have mentioned. The Ajaokuta, you talked about ASCOM. We had the fertilizer plant, I think, somewhere in Onne, and all over the country. What has happened? They have all gone bust. It is not because, those who were supposed to operate it lacked the ability. But again, a lot has to do with our government. What is the desire of government to provide?
Even the Eastern Europeans who brought into DSC at some point, they all left.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these are some of the issues. So I do not believe me. I think that this meeting is more or less a gambit, by the Russian government to flex its influence or to show its influence all over the world. I mean, other powerful nations are doing it. So it is more, to a very large extent, more of a diplomatic coup. By by Russia's Vladimir Putin. But that is not to say that we cannot make something out of it. It's just like you have said, the structures that we have in place, is there anything new? And so on the basis of that, I'm not exactly very optimistic, but you never know. You understand? I do not think anything fundamental. I mean, we're talking about NNPC, for instance. NNPC is known by a lot of people in this country. And even internationally, look at the 90 reports and all that as one of the most opaque, departments or ministries or departments or agencies in the country. They do not have budgets that are made known to the Nigerian people. We've had instances where all kinds of sundry accounts are opened, all over the world, even without the knowledge of the National Assembly and all that. So I'm not very, very optimistic. That with the kind of structure we have in place, there could be a fundamental realignment, of priorities by the Nigerian government to make some of these things work. But if they do work, like I said, perhaps there could be new impetus, new initiatives, new commitments. Then, we are going to end up being happy again with the agreements. But I'm not exactly holding my breath, because we've seen this thing come and go, and because we've not had any fundamental change within, the structure of governance, again, in terms of the mindset of the people who are holding sway at the political level, I'm not exactly, I do not exactly feel that perhaps they have the ability to make something good come out of this.
Okay, so let's talk security. Now, we are aware that the Russian government was of great assistance during the civil war. And then as well, they have also signed they signed military contracts with about 21 other African countries. Now, even Vladimir Putin himself said that about 2,000 Islamic State fighters have joined Boko Haram as of 2019. So we are aware that there are international players. It's no longer a domestic fight. Let's talk security. How can this summit help fight the Boko Haram and the terrorists that we're currently facing today?
Yes, again, I'm also worried about the overlapping of agreements, security agreements that the country is signing with virtually every country that they're in partnership with. Whereas in a security agreement with the United States, there's a security agreement, even with, I think the Chinese also, they want to, fund, well, they say too many cooks spoil the broth. So the danger is also, there's no doubt about that. But beyond that again, when it comes to security of this nature, you would say that the Russians, to a very large extent, have expertise in that. After all, they were able to deal with insurgency in Chechnya. It was budding at a particular point in time, and there were, of course, people also questioned, their human rights.
They couldn't fight the Taliban during the Cold War. The Taliban did them over during the Cold War. The Americans used the Taliban to fight them using Charlie Wilson during the Cold War.
You're absolutely right. Of course, like you said, there was a context within the, by the time they invaded, Afghanistan. Of course, the Americans also moved in there, and then we also funding the other side. And that is what
the Mujahideen,
the Mujahideen especially, and that is the essence actually of even the Cold War. Once you go in this way, the other side goes this way because they want to undermine you. But apart from that, of course, once the great powers are involved in some of this, insurgency and counterinsurgency, it is difficult for you to bring it to an end. Even Americans themselves, by the time they eventually went into Afghanistan, they could also not conquer Afghanistan. The British, too, if you look at the history of that region, because of the treacherous nature of the, that particular geography where it is. But beyond that, like I said, they've had some successes in Chechnya. They have been involved in Syria to a very large extent. They also have some successes. But my worry with Russian involvement is that perhaps it's an advantage and a disadvantage. Where you have, for instance, Europe, they talk about the rule of law, transparency, and so many other things. Even though you want to go deeper into that, you find out that you look at Libya. What happened to Libya? The chaos in Libya today is both an American and European construct. They were behind it. What happened in Iraq that eventually led to the ISIS that all of us are also talking about. American involvement in Iraq and all that. But still, regardless of that, they might be in a position to actually help security-wise. Well, like I said, it is this overlapping of agreements that Nigeria keeps on signing with. Everybody that comes along, Nigeria signs a security agreement, another security agreement. So at the end of the day, you're exactly lost. You don't know exactly what this one is supposed to do and that. And then again, Russia's link with mercenaries, I think it's also something in a way, that worries me. There is this, over time, linkage between the Russian government and the fact that they could also export mercenaries, not exactly Russian troops, but mercenaries to other African countries to help to prop up regimes and all of that. It's also something that one should also be, worried about because, of course, that like mercenaries, exactly, of course, that mercenaries are soldiers of fortune. Their primary responsibility, has nothing to do with even the fights. They are not even interested in the motivation or the ideology of even, behind any conflict. The thing is that they have to be paid money.
Mr. Achike, we'll come back to talk about the balance of trade here, but we need to go on a quick break. I'll be right back to discuss some more on the Russia-Africa Summit, the first of its kind. Join us again after this break. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News, and we're still discussing the Russia-Africa Summit holding in Sochi. And to help us with that is Achike Chude, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Pleasure.
And before that, the commencement of this summit, President Putin made a comment to say that he is going to do relations with Africa without strings attached, unlike the West. He didn't mention any particular country. While this summit may be seen as a belated entry into the scramble for the continent's resources by Russia, what is stopping Russia from tilting the balance in our favor? Do you see fair partnerships emerging from this, or is it just the same horizontal relationship we've always had?
No, you see, there's always, you must always draw a distinction between desire and ability. You know, so they might have the ambition to want to do certain things, you know, in Africa and for African nations, but they clearly do not have the ability. They do not have the financial wherewithal of Europe, of the United States, of Japan, of China. You know, and that's why people are a little bit surprised that Russia tried to break out of its traditional geopolitical hemisphere, which has always been, you know, Russia and then the former members of the Soviet Socialist Republic, the Baltic, you know, countries, you know, and then Eastern, yeah, exactly. Those have been of strategic geopolitical importance to Russia. You know, so this exactly is, I think, the very first time that Russia is breaking, you know, that. Of course, for quite some time now, Russia has been flexing some muscles all over the world, especially the Middle East, in Syria, where they seem to have taken a lot of advantage. Under the Obama administration, and even, I think, the previous Republican governments, the plan was to keep Russia out of Syria. But of course, Russia has always, they have, you know, a base in Syria, even before the uprising that led to the crisis right now, you know, in Syria. You know, so I think that this is a novelty, you know, for Russia. But like I said, they do not have the wherewithal, even if they had the intention. They need a lot of money for the kind of investments that they want to do. Our level of investment, I think, in Africa is around $20 billion already. Though I heard somewhere that Russia was going to forgive the Africa's debt of about $20 billion. I have not seen the details. I don't know, you know, when that is going to happen. But again, I think before now, I think African countries would have been worried about the reaction of America and Europe with what they are trying to do with Russia. But obviously, like I have said, America has new priorities, especially with the Trump administration. Europe is involved in all kinds of internal contradictions, especially with the Brexit and so many other things, though a lot of them are also on their own individually as nations coming to Africa. Theresa May, if you remember, was here in the wake of the Brexit because they were looking for new partners in case Brexit eventually happened. The German Chancellor was also there. There are also immigration issues. You understand, the Italians and the rest, they want to resolve some of the problems with immigration that is also affecting domestic politics in Europe. In their own countries, like in Italy, like in Germany. Of course, you know what has happened with Angela Merkel's government. So all of these things, there's a linkage, one way, you know, or the other. Again, like in a place like Guinea, for instance, Rusal continues to play of Russia. After China, I think they have the biggest industrial, you know, steel, you know, complex. They are also playing a role in those places. And the funny thing was that you had the ambassador of you know, Russia to Guinea resigning his ambassadorship and then accepting a job at Rusa, the local district in Guinea. Yeah, but I think of major importance to Nigeria is the fact that one of the biggest tragedies in the country has been the Ajaokuta Steel Company. And that's why a lot of people feel bad with what is happening in this country, because Nigeria has no business flirting with poverty. We have been given everything that is needed to be strong, to be a successful country, to be a country that all of us can be proud of. Essentially, oil. And of course, from the derivatives of oil, there are all kinds of products there. You have...
Actually, I hear we'll stand by. We'll quickly go to Abuja. But before we go to Abuja, I mean, the question comes in. They have been doing things with South Africa. Russia has been doing things with South Africa. Don't you think it's Russia trying to gain world supremacy? I'll ask that question before, after we go to Abuja, and we go to the proceedings of Maina, the former pensions boss. If Abuja is ready for us, okay, great. So we just want to take proceedings from Abuja now, see what's happening in the court. Maina and his son are in court today. People are seated in court now. Proceedings are going on, and we're going to see this. The charges filed against them. And his son is in that suit because when he was to be apprehended, his son actually brought out a gun to challenge security forces. So that's why his son, too, is in that suit. And we all remember the story of Achike Chude, the pension funds, lots and lots of amount of money.
Yes, and he's been preferred with 12 counts bordering on money laundering, operating fictitious bank accounts, and fraud against him. He's in the same court. He's in the same court, but on a separate but similar charges as his son as well, Faisal. And as you recall, that another judge of the Federal High Court, Justice Folashade Giwa Gumbajo, had on Tuesday granted an interim forfeiture order on 23 landed properties traced to Maina. The court also gave an order directing the publication of the order of this interim forfeiture in different national daily newspapers.
This is one case a lot of Nigerians are paying keen interest on. Remember the Disappearance and Appearance Act, supposedly pulled by Mr. Maina, the firing and rehiring by the president at some time, the face-off between himself and the Minister of Health, the erstwhile Minister of Health at that time. But one reason why Nigerians should pay attention, and everyone should pay attention to this case, perhaps, is the fact that it borders on the health insurance of Nigeria. After decades of its launch, we still have barely 10% of Nigerians covered under the scheme.
Barely 10%? Less than 2%.
Exactly.
Less than 2%.
So is the issue of the corruption there. And I wonder if Mr. Achike would like to say something about this case, because you've been watching this as well.
Yeah, but you know that the horse bolted from the stable a long time ago. You know, and though, you know, it is said better late than never. Of course, before now, a lot of Nigerians have believed that he's been protected by the powers that be, because there were all kinds of contradictions. You had a man that was, you know, being looked for by the authorities. All of a sudden, he resurfaces, and then he's within the ministry, and he's promoted, and all that, even with all the charges hanging around him. And so I think his time has come. I think his cup is full. It would appear that he has become an embarrassment to those who have been protecting him, and that they want to make an issue. They want to give the right kind of impression to the Nigerian people that they were, after all, not protecting him. So let's see how this case is going to play out. But whichever way it goes, people are going to say that circumstances, made it inevitable for his backers, in very high places in this country to withdraw from him and allow him to face justice.
I understand we have Nkechi in Abuja. Nkechi, if you could just give us some updates. Nkechi, it's good to see you again.
The Federal High Court in Abuja, where the former chairman of the Defunct Pensions Reform Task Force is going to be arraigned with his son Faisal Maina. So Abdul Rashad Maina and his son are going to be arraigned in Justice Ikong Abbas Court, which is just behind me. The both of them are now present in the courtroom, as you can see. Now, from the cause list, it is noted that the Economics and Financial Crimes Commission is going to charge Faisal and his father Maina on separate charges. Now, the charges are not particularly known. However, they will be bordering on money laundering, fraud, and as for Faisal, who is just 20 years old, he may be charged with resisting arrest and pulling a gun at a DSS operative. This is according to the Department of State Services. We recall that on the 30th of September, they were arrested at a hotel here in Abuja, and the DSS said that Faisal resisted arrest and pulled a pistol on the DSS operatives. Now, fast forward to October 2nd, they were handed over to the EFCC, who is now arraigning them right here at the Federal High Court in Abuja. Now, this case is quite interesting because it's very controversial. We all know that Abdul Rashad Maina has been evading arrest for 4 years now. He has been allegedly living in Dubai and snuck into the country at around June of this year before the DSS arrested him on the 30th of September. Now, we recall that back in 2013, the Federal Civil Service Commission dismissed Maina from his position based on fraudulent allegations to the tune of 2.1 billion.
Engaging reporting there from the courts for us. Initially, I might have mixed up my analysis with that of the NHIS boss, Professor Husman. But we do know the case of Maina and his son, such impunity, level of
why is the 20-year-old boy in possession of a pistol to begin with, and then to pull that out on a DSS operative?
20-year-old man, by the way, man.
Oh, his father is a very rich, very wealthy, very influential, very, very powerful man.
Who can appear and disappear when he wants.
That has taken a public imagination about his activities to the zenith. And he has seen the impunity with which the father has gone about doing all kinds of things and then getting away with it and being protected by the state. So for all you know, it gets to a level where some of these people think je suis l'État c'est moi, and the state is me. So ensconced by, the trappings of power, and the appurtenances of office, there is always that tendency for you to lose your head and believe that you can do everything and anything and get away with it.
And just to sum up on the initial discussion for the day, which is the Russia-Africa Summit, before we digress into that developing story in the courts today, you are not optimistic.
I was talking about world dominance. Is this not just world dominance by Russia again? It's not that they're in economic slavery, they're coming into Africa. Because if you heard the president of Uganda, when he was asking for favor, he said, can we buy weapons on credit? I mean, that's where it starts from. He said, normally we pay cash to buy weapons from Russia. But now they're asking for credit, timeline, and other thing. Is it not just colonialism all over again? As we wrap up.
Very quickly.
I think I started, this way, and I said, look, that the way our, leaders line up before these people asking for, this or that is an embarrassment to the continent. So they are obviously driving the whole dialogue.
Now, thank you so much, Achike Chude, for being on the show today.